Improve Your Website E. If you're on Twitter and would like to follow her or quote her, use her handle @LilyRayNYC and use the hashtag SEJ Live. We will have a live Q&A at the end of both Lily and Jory's presentation, so please ask any questions you have. Without any further ado, Lily, take it away.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to How to Improve Your Website's EAT. My name is Lily Ray. I'm the Director of SEO at Path Interactive. We're a digital marketing agency here in New York City. Now, if you've been following my work over the past couple of years, you've probably noticed that I've been talking about EAT a lot. Now, why is that? Well, if you've been working in SEO over the past couple of years, you've probably experienced these big core algorithm updates that have rolled out. And EAT seems to be the common underlying factor behind a lot of these updates. Now let's take a step back. What exactly is EAT? Well, according to Google, EAT is defined as expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness of the creator of the main content itself, as well as the website. Now, is EAT a ranking factor? No, that's not exactly how this works. It's not like something like keywords in your title tag, using HTTPS, or considering your page speed. However, EAT is a growing trend in SEO, and it's definitely something worth paying attention to. In Google Search Quality Guidelines, EAT is actually mentioned 135 times. Also, Google published a white paper last year called How Google Fights Disinformation, in which they talk a lot about EAT and the role that it plays in Google's algorithms. Furthermore, whenever a core update happens, Google shares this article called What Webmasters Should Know About Google Core Updates. And there's a dedicated section to EAT, why it's important, how it's used, and why you should consider it if your site has been affected by a core algorithm update. So how exactly does EAT work? Well, the concept of EAT originated in the 2014 version of Google Search Quality Guidelines. This is an 160-plus page document that explicitly defines what Google considers to be high or low quality content. Now, how does this process all work? Well, Google conducts evaluations with search quality raters in which they use the search quality guidelines to educate the raters and to teach them what's considered to be high and low quality content. The raters then submit their answers, and Google uses that feedback to benchmark and inform future algorithms. The algorithms are then capable of identifying signals that correlate with EAT, for example, PageRank and links. Now, whenever you ask Google about EAT, you'll notice some common language. Here's Denny Sullivan saying it's almost like we look for signals that align with EAT. Also, in How Google Fights Disinformation, they use that same language. They say Google's algorithms identify signals about pages that correlate with EAT, and that the best known of these signals is PageRank. So I think it's really important to focus on that key phrase, signals that align with EAT. So has Google confirmed exactly what these signals are? Unfortunately, no, except for PageRank and links. So does that then imply that on-page signals aren't part of Google's EAT evaluations? No, that's certainly not the case. It's just that Google hasn't explicitly confirmed which signals are really part of EAT. Now, believe me, I've been trying to get more information about this for a long time. This was me sitting in a room with Google, and the very first question I asked was, hey guys, how exactly does Google measure EAT? I didn't really get a straight answer. It's almost like Google doesn't want to talk too much about the specifics of EAT. Now, why would that be the case? It's almost like SEOs love to spam things. Come on, guys, let's own up to it. Here's just a small example of the things that SEOs have spammed to death. We have Google+, we have meta keywords, blog comments, rel author, cloaking, all these nice things that we used to be able to use for SEO purposes that have since gone into the Google graveyard. And maybe Google doesn't want its secret sauce for analyzing EAT to end up in that Google graveyard. Or maybe it's because EAT is some part of a larger initiative by Google. Search engines and social media companies have been facing government scrutiny. This isn't a secret at this point. We have a lot of things in the news, like the fact that Google's been pledging $300 million to fight fake news. We have the government's scrutinizing Google and the other social media platforms. We have the tech giants talking about election security and reducing misinformation related to elections. Most recently, we have a lot of disinformation about coronavirus circulating, not only on the search engines, but also on the social media sites. And these companies have been grappling with this and really trying to figure out how they can reduce bad information and surface high quality content. Now, in a great study by Eli Schwartz, we have the fact that 77% of Americans have admitted to going online to diagnose their medical symptoms. Now, if you're like me and you've done this, you've probably experienced that the results are not always super trustworthy. So that's something that Google's well aware of. And for this reason, they created something called symptom cards in 2016. And this is just like any other search feature where you can get a lot of that information directly in the search results. But the way that Google sourced this information is by collaborating with a team of medical doctors that made up part of their knowledge graph. So people from the Harvard Medical School and the Mayo Clinic. And they're really just trying to ensure that they're providing the most trustworthy medical information directly in the search results. Now, as an interesting side note, there was something that The Atlantic disclosed last year called Project Nightingale, in which they mentioned that Google had secretly harvested tens of millions of medical records, such as patient names, lab results, diagnoses, and hospitalization records from more than 2,600 hospitals around the US. I also thought it was very interesting that Google acquired Fitbit around this same time. So it seems to be the case that Google's doing big things with health information. Now, again, this is just my personal speculation, but maybe something like this is on our horizon, a Google Health portal in which you can type your symptoms or your medical issues directly into Google and get that information in the search results themselves without the need to click on any other website, the same way that we currently have it for things like flights or jobs. But it is also interesting to note that the algorithm updates seem to be disproportionately impacting health and medical websites. So the August 1st, 2018 update was informally labeled medic for this exact reason. It really disproportionately affected sites in the health and medical categories. And we've seen a similar pattern with subsequent core updates. So websites that are in the natural medicine categories, wellness, rehab, illness prevention, have all really disproportionately felt the impact of these core updates. And this brings us to another acronym that Google's created called YMYL, Your Money, Your Life. So these are websites and content that can directly impact the happiness, safety, financial security, or overall well-being of their users. So what Google says about this is that they know they have an important responsibility to the users and the societies in which they operate to curb the efforts of those who aim to propagate misinformation or false information on their platforms. So again, this is just my personal speculation, but maybe all these things are connected. The fight against pseudoscience and misinformation online, the fact that Project Nightingale happened and Google acquired Fitbit, the fact that there's this fight against fake news and government scrutinizing Google. We have your money, your life content on the internet, as well as dangerous health advice. Maybe EAT is the common underlying principle that we can use to think about all these different issues that are impacting Google as well as the quality of its search results. So my personal definition for EAT is that it's Google's criteria for analyzing the trustworthiness of content as well as the people who publish it as a way to mitigate the spread of misinformation online. However, only Google themselves know exactly which signals factor into their EAT evaluations. So what does that leave us SEOs with? Well, we have speculation, we have data that we can look at, and we also have patents. So when it comes to patents, who other should we look at than Bill Slawski, who's published a fantastic article about a patent that was actually released at the same time as the Medic update called Google Using Website Representation Vectors to Classify Sites with Expertise and Authority. Now, what does this patent do? It uses neural networks to understand patterns and features behind websites as a way to then classify those websites. The classifications can include an expert level of sites in the health domain, an apprentice level, or a layperson level. And they're also based upon different levels of expertise. And the patent also indicates that it could be ranking pages on the basis of authority as well. Now, what might this look like in practice? So I thought it was really interesting to look at these two sites side by side. We have examine.com, which is the largest online database of unbiased, science-backed, evidence-based nutrition and supplement research online. Now, we also have a website called Buy Phentermine Online 24/7. Now, this is an online marketplace for phentermine, which is a weight loss supplement that claims to help with anxiety, increases your learning capacity, but it also causes rapid or irregular heartbeat, delirium, panic, psychosis, or heart failure. Now, what's interesting about these two sites side by side? Well, if you look at their organic visibility over time, you're going to see an interesting pattern. Perhaps Google is classifying these sites in the same way. With a handful of previous core updates, the sites saw similar patterns in terms of their organic visibility, including last year around July 17th, when both sites lost almost all of their SEO visibility on an unconfirmed Google update. Now, as of the January 2020 core update, there's a bit of a divergence happening. So maybe Google's realizing that these two sites are not so similar after all. So this could be an example of how Google's potentially classifying websites. Now, what's important to think about is that if your website is classified as a YMYL website, your EAT is going to be held to a higher standard. So what exactly can you do about that? Well, let's think specifically about the signals that align with EAT. And let's look at the qualities of the websites that have been winning these core algorithm updates. So you might be wondering, what process, what methodology are you using when you're analyzing EAT? Well, I've been doing this for a couple years now, and what I like to do is I analyze several hundred, in this case 500 plus winners and losers of the algorithm updates. To do this, I'm using the Systrix Visibility Index, using the US Index. I use archive.org, also known as the Wayback Machine, to look at sites before and after they gained or lost traffic as a result of the algorithm updates, and to see what changes they've been making over time. I'm using crawlers to extract page elements and to analyze those elements at scale. I'm using a tool called readable.io, and there's several others out there that do similar things, basically just to analyze the readability of content. I'm looking at structured data usage and the presence of these brands and their content creators within the knowledge graph. And I'm also looking specifically at your money or life queries and taking a look at who's able to perform for these queries. Now, one common thread that you'll see is that winning sites tend to disclose who their authors are, and they utilize expert reviewers in their content whenever possible. And this is especially true for your money or your life websites. If you Google things like health queries or medical queries, you're almost always going to see nowadays that the top ranking sites not only disclose who their authors are, but they also mention the experts that have reviewed this content. Healthline is an example of a site that does this tremendously well. If you click on any of their expert reviewer names, you're going to be taken to a page where you can learn more about that expert, where they went to school, all the different awards that they've won, why they should be trusted to write about these topics. And these biographies are also going to include links to their personal websites, their LinkedIn profiles, their Facebook profiles, and really just creating a footprint for these authors and experts and establishing why you should trust them to verify the content that you're reading on Healthline. Another thing that Healthline does quite well is that if maybe they don't have experts on staff to write about certain topics, they collaborate with real experts in those fields. So they'll reach out to experts and say, we've worked with these people to write this content. Here's what their names are. Here's a link to the other places where they've been mentioned online. And then they actually take the expertise of those experts and use that to craft the content. Now, a common question that I get from my clients when I do these types of exercises is to say, Lily, I added the author names to all my articles, but I'm not seeing any impact. Now, it's important to remember that the author bios and expert reviewers are not ranking factors in and of themselves. Ideally, when you're using this process of having experts review your content, they're going to ensure that your content is high quality and evidence-based as part of that process. So what does this actually look like in practice? Substantiating your claims is very important, especially for YMYL websites. So here's an example of a website called Diet Doctor, and almost every sentence on the page has a little number that you can click on, and you can see the source of where they got that information. You can see the extent to which they believe that you can trust that source, and they include more than one source there, so you can potentially verify the claim from different places. And they have this throughout all the content. So it really instills trust in the user about how much they can actually trust the content that they're reading. Now, another common question I get from my clients is, but Lily, Google has no way of knowing who all my authors are. And that's true to an extent. Of course, Google can't keep tabs on every single publisher on the internet. But it doesn't mean they're not trying. So if you pay attention to what's happening with the knowledge graph, this is just one example of what Google's been doing with authors and experts over time. So you'll notice now, if you look up a certain variety of queries, such as almond, you're going to see that there's experts listed at the bottom of the knowledge panel who actually provide short videos. And this is a program called Google Cameos, in which Google asks these experts, hey, would you be willing to answer a couple of questions about this topic? And who are these experts? Well, if you look up their names, you're going to see that they have their own personal knowledge graph that shows the extent to which they're real experts that can be trusted to provide information about these topics. And you can actually go through this exercise. So you can use what's called the Google Knowledge Graph Search API. There's a handful of tools out there that make it really easy to do this. And you can look up your brand, the people who write for your brand, and you can see, does Google know who they are? Are they included in the knowledge graph? Does somebody else with the same name have more relevance to Google as far as the knowledge graph is confirmed? And if Google does know about my brand or does know about my authors, what information does it have included in its knowledge graph? Now, structured data can directly feed into this. Schema can really play a role in confirming your EAT. And you can also use schema.org, the website itself, to go through the various schema properties that they have and use that when you're crafting your content. Maybe all those different attributes are things that you can list on the page. So I'm going to talk about how you can use schema to enhance the E and the A portion of EAT. And later, Jory is going to talk about how you can use schema to improve the T, the trustworthiness of your content. So as far as improving the expertise and authoritativeness of your content through schema, you can use things like person, organization, or local business schema. And think about including things like, what language does the person know? What's their job title? What university did they go to? For an organization, maybe you want to include the date it was founded, the founder themselves. What organization are they a member of, or what's the parent company? And for local businesses, maybe you want to include, or you should include, the hours, the opening hours, the address of the local business, the telephone number, all these things that help users to make sure that they can really get in touch with somebody at your business. Now, there's a famous quote by a philosopher called Aesop, in which he states, a website is known by the company that it keeps. Well, not exactly, but the same sentiment can be thought about for SEO. You can use the crawler of your choice to audit the external links on your website. So in this case, I'm using SiteVault to run a domain, click on external, click on top external domains, and see a list of who my site is linking to. Are they authoritative websites? Do I trust them? Do I want my website to be associated with those websites? That's a great practice to go through when you're auditing your EAT. Also, we have the fact that Google's confirmed that comments on the page do factor into the overall quality of the page. So especially if you're a YMYL website, maybe you don't want low quality comments potentially weighing down the quality of the page. So maybe you should remove those comments entirely. Now, conversely, if they're good comments, maybe you want to keep them there and respond to those users. You can also conduct reputation research, eliminating your domain as one of the search results. So you can look at things like reviews, scam, fraud, and really see what's the footprint of your brand's reputation online and whether there's any issues that you need to address. Now, what are some things that losing sites get wrong? Well, number one is deception, and number two is taking shortcuts. So if you want to improve your EAT, you should think about stopping some of these following practices. Auto-generating your content, overwhelming your users with advertisements or calls to action. Maybe you're guilt tripping them into taking a certain call to action. Your content might be too salesy on YMYL content. Maybe you don't have a great customer support process or ways for users to get in touch with you. Maybe you haven't been addressing your bad reviews or questions that people are asking about your brand. Are you using distracting ads that are too hard to close? Or producing a lot of meaningless SEO content that's good for search, but not necessarily good for your users? Or do you have a lot of low quality local landing pages, maybe in places where you don't actually do business? Are there mysteries about who your brand is or who your authors are and who's behind the content? Or maybe you've been engaging in a lot of paid link campaigns over the years that can really have an impact on how much search engines trust your site. Now, it's important to remember that EAT initiatives can't always be tied to confirmed SEO ranking factors, and that's okay. Improving your EAT requires a serious consideration of what's best for your users and not just for search engines. And with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of the SEJ Summit. Goodbye, everyone.
Wow, really great presentation there, Lily. Next up, we have Jory Ford, the Chief Marketing Officer at